Hello. In the previous video lessons, we have discussed the theory of comparative advantage, which suggests that countries can benefit by specializing in production of goods where they have a comparative advantage. But if you think about the real world, then no country, in fact, is fully specialized in just a single good. So the purpose of this lesson is to then consider what really prevents countries from doing what the theory of comparative advantage would suggest. There are at least three basic reasons why the real world economy is not that extremely specialized as the theory of comparative advantage would suggest. One is that it's perhaps, even though the theory of comparative advantage is really elegant in its simplicity, it is perhaps somewhat too simplistic. And in the next theme, we will consider also introduce, besides labor, we also take into account the capital input. So when we have more than just the labor input, as in this previous treatment of the theory of comparative advantage, then introducing the capital input tends to reduce the specialization. So that's something that we will discuss in the following lessons. The second reason is also something that we will discuss later, and that comes to this protective measures such as tariffs. And I'll come to the tariffs shortly. And thirdly, there's also, of course, transport costs that we haven't really taken into account in these previous examples. So in some case, of course, high costs of transportation is enough to really make trading not profitable. So let's consider the second and third explanation in a little bit more detail. And firstly, let's go talk about the tariffs a little bit. So this figure, taken from the core textbook, indicates the difference in the average tariffs rates in low and middle income countries, which is the blue curve, and then high income countries, the red curve. So in the high income countries, the average tariff rates have been relatively low already in the early 90s and still decreased further from about 10% to less than 5% in more recent years. So it's mostly low and middle income countries. You can find also relatively high tariffs, at least until relatively recently. So in the 80s, the average tariff rate could be even higher than 30%. So that's of course already quite a large impediment to trade. So this has been so far the trend that the average tariff rates have been decreasing, but now with the second term of Donald Trump as the U.S. president, perhaps this decline in tariff rates might be turning to increase. Then let's consider this could be equally the price gap through the transport costs, or it could be also due to tariffs. So how does this kind of gap then affect trade? So in this figure, the idea is that we have a demand and supply and this kind of equilibrium. So recall from the introductory economics lessons that we have usually this kind of downward sloping demand curve, which is here indicated with the red color. So this is the consumer demand. So as the price decreases, the demand increases. And then also in this figure, we have the blue-colored supply curve that indicates the exporters' supply. So this is, of course, then this kind of foreign exporter that can sell the same good. And the idea of this figure is to indicate that if there is very large transport costs or very large tariffs, if there is this will create this price cap T. So let's say if initially there is this price cap is 5 euros or pounds or dollars, whatever unit we have. So if this let's say that we have the price that the consumer needs to pay is 7.25, and the exporter then receives only 2.75. So this price gap is five, let's say 5 euros. So that could be due to transport cost, but it could equally well be a tariff in this example. So if there is such kind of very high transport cost, then the quantity of consumption is only 4,000 in this example. Suppose that there is no domestic production of this good. Then suppose that the transport costs decrease or the tariff decreases. So if instead of 5 we have only 2 euros transport cost, then what happens then? Then when the price gap, if we have T asterisk, when the price gap is smaller, then this will mean that exports will increase and the consumer prices will fall. So with this 2 euros price gap, then consumers end up paying 6 euros and exporters receive 4 euros. So the gap is only 2 euros and the export volume increases from 4,000 to 6,000. So consumers benefit in terms of lower prices and larger quantity. So another example to illustrate historically this kind of similar idea taken from the core textbook, by the way, is indicated here. So this goes back to the early 19th century and describes the British wheat imports from the USA. So the red color curve indicates the price gap as a percentage with the 3-year moving average. So in the United States, the wheat production, wheat could be produced in a relatively cheaper way than in a more high population density Great Britain. So there was a large price gap in the 19th century. But then with this, when the transport cost decreased, and we know that there would be, of course, from sailboats to the steam engine vessels, the transportation cost would decrease. So we see that the red curve, this price gap would decrease over time, starting from the mid 19th century. And we have also in this figure the blue curve, which indicates British imports of wheat, indicated on the right axis. So as this price gap was falling, then we see also a clear trend that this British imports of US wheat were also increasing. So this is kind of historical example of when this transport costs were very high, then that would also show up as this kind of large difference in the prices. And when the transport cost came down, then also there would be more trade and the price gap would also decrease. So finally, I want to also give you one important practical innovation that has also can explain this kind of great increase in world trade in the recent decades, and that relates to the container evolution. So I have taken here some figure from an article by Bernhofen et al. In Journal of International Economics. So in this figure, it indicates the growth of world trade, and there is also this 1966 is indicated as this year when this global container era began. And this table by Bernhofen et al. Also indicates that how this introduction of standardized containers improved productivity of dock labor and also had a large increase in average ship size, and then led also to the greater concentration of ports in Europe, and also then how much this insurance cost and capital requirements decreased as a result of this containerization. So when this kind of more standardized container size enabled also that a large amount of containers can be transported by a single vessel, then obviously the transport costs had to major decrease, and that can partly, or in very large part, in fact, explain this huge increase in global trade from the 1970s onwards. So in the next lesson, then we go to the next theme, which relates to the so-called specific factors model, where we also take into account the capital input. See you then.